Hello, lovelies. Welcome to the Fat Joy podcast, where we talk each week about how to flourish in an anti-fat world. I'm Sophia, Apostle, a fat person and professional coach who loves talking to other fat people about what it's like to live within oppressive systems that marginalize our bodies, and how we still dare to have the audacity and courage to reach towards our collective liberation and embrace our joy. Please know this is an adult content podcast, so there will be swears, we will be talking about harms we've experienced, and we will be rebelling against diet culture, anti-fatness, ableism, racism, etc. If you'd like to support the Fat Joy podcast, please check us out at patreon.com/fatjoy. Oh, and I'm so glad you're here with us. Enjoy. Hello, lovelies. Welcome back to the Fat Joy podcast. I am so excited to have Trevia joining us today. Hi, Trevia.
Hello.
Trevia, we know each other from the wonderful Kelly Deals because I signed up for the feminist copywriting certificate and you're very involved in her program. And so lovely to see you again. For anyone listening who doesn't know Kelly Deals, definitely check her out as well. Include a link in the show notes. The work she's doing is incredible. Trevia, how about you tell us a little bit about you?
Wonderful. Yes, I love talking about me. Okay, sometimes. Let's see. My name's Trevia Woods. I would identify myself as a mixed-race woman with Indigenous ancestors. And let's see, I have like a lot of experience in bodywork, education, and community building. I love helping support people unpack cultural appropriation and also community building. And I love, and this is Kelly Deal's term, because, I work in her ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
I love helping culture makers gift the world with their knowledge, their intellectual property, if you will, and lived experience, get that out in the world. I love to help them do that. So yeah, I get to have a fun time. That's all I have to say.
Well, and you're very good at it too. You're very good at it. So I agree. I love that term that Kelly created, culture makers.
It's true. And I didn't even and when I think about how I identify, I'm also a fat woman.
Yeah.
And I'm queer. So, there's, I'm a mom. What more labels? We could spend an hour.
Yeah, labeling ourselves.
all kinds of identifying labelers. But I would love, and if it's okay with you, that I also do a quick land acknowledgement. I just feel like that's really important.
Yes.
I just love to acknowledge that I'm on the traditional land of the Eno, the Tutelo, the Saponi, the Okanichi, the Socorri, and the Tuscarora people, past, present, and future. You know what we can do if people are wondering about that land acknowledgement? I have a free land acknowledge resource. You don't have to sign up for any list. There's no strings attached at all. Literally, there's a link. You go right to it. I'll be happy to have you put that in the show notes if people are like, oh, I've been curious about that.
I would love that. Thank you. I've just made a note to myself. Yes, I checked it out and it's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you. I will definitely share that. And thank you for doing a land acknowledgement for this moment. So Trevia, as you know, we're going to talk about all things fat and fatness and anti-fatness and anti-oppression, which so aligns with the work that you do in the world as well around cultural appropriation, lineage. So let's just dive in with what is your relationship to the word fat and how has that journey towards that word gone for you?
Whew, talk about a loaded question. Love it, Sophia. Okay, so presently, I use the term fat as an identifier for myself as a positive or just a neutral term, not as a negative one. But it's taking a long time for me to get there, and lots of years, lots of steps. I think a lot of it is because I have PCOS. And I've known that for mid 20 years, at least.
Oh, wow.
I was diagnosed when I was really young. I was I think 21 or 22. And, back then it was, you might have trouble having a kid, right? Fertility stuff. Mm-hmm. So you'll come and see us and you'll need a diet, just diet. bleh. And unfortunately, I took that advice, like most people in the world, and continually tried to make my body smaller without, having the proper medical treatment and all of that. And it actually, I think, made it worse for me, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm dealing with a lot of side effects on yo-yo dieting, even though I haven't done that for years.
Yeah.
But I am working on just continuing to unpack fat phobia that's inside me, like that internalized fat phobia, and find joy in my own fatness and like how I am presently and how I can enjoy my body. Someone who's helped me with that, I'll probably drop lots of stuff.
Yeah,
I'll give you
all
the show notes, right? The show notes are going to be so juicy. There is a podcast called 3 Questions with Kat and Val. Have you heard of this one?
Oh, I don't know if I have.
Okay, well,
I'll check it out.
Absolutely delicious. I just have to say, absolutely delicious. Won't say much other than Kat definitely identifies as fat, and the way they've described like being fat and having sex and being intimate and like all this, it's just so delicious.
Yeah.
It's really amazing. Anyway, so just finding different things like that to just like bring in the lusciousness of my fatness. I don't know. Can't be. I'm not so eloquent. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I love that you also mentioned internalized fat phobia, because I think this is something that I think is a little harder for people. I can name, 30,000 things out in the world that are fat phobic. And it's hard for me, after having done so much work to get to where I am with my body, to realize, there are still pockets of that internalized fat phobia. And I know, how can there not be? I know to be gentle with myself, but it is so deep in there. So Trevia, for you, because you mentioned working on the internalized fat phobia piece, the internalized anti-fatness, like 10 years ago, what would that have been like 5 years ago? And now, could you take us through a little bit of, timeline?
Sure. It's interesting because I've had a few lives, as anyone who's middle-aged at this point. And, some of my family members are, larger, and it's always been, my mom constantly dieted. Right. And that was just, it's just very common. I remember my aunt, my mom always talking about diets and whatnot. And now I laugh because they weren't, they were straight size bodies all the way. But when I think about being a adult and I had my son, and being the heaviest at that point I've ever been in my life. So the only thing I knew how to do was to diet and to try all the things. And there's, plenty out there to spend your money on and to do. And no need to name them. We could just fill in the blank. But then I moved to China. And so this is about 15 years ago, I'd say. 13, 10. And I moved to China, and, people in China are built different. It just is what it is. And they have a completely different culture, as you do when you're living in someone else's country and you're an immigrant in someone else's country. And it was really difficult I was, a small fat then, not, very able-bodied, very athletic. I had done triathlons, right? Like all this stuff, but I was, still, I think, I don't know if you want to do sizes, but I was about a size 18, which in America, you could find clothes in a regular store, but most often, like, you were right on that line, that 16 to 18 line. That's like this weird place, especially back then. And so I remember, like, when I would go, I couldn't find clothes that would fit me, and I would have to come home and buy all my clothes. And people would say stuff, like right to your face. And so I was always trying. And I remember that's the last time that that was one of the times when I ended up losing a lot of weight. And but I still had the body I had, right? I still have my grandma's body, and it's never going to be, I wasn't born a Chinese and a Chinese, you know what I mean? Like, that's just not my genetic makeup. And, we're all different. And so I remember that was interesting. And then I decided we got a job in Saudi Arabia. So I was an international teacher. I taught
cool.
at international school. So
can I ask a question about when you were in China and teaching in international school? Did your body size impact in that way? Like, did the students say anything? Were there issues with admin? Because oftentimes fatness in the workplace is actually quite detrimental. There's a lot of assumptions. You're often paid less. Did you experience any of that?
Interested in China in the workplace, I did not. Other than because all the teachers were either mostly Canadian and US,
right?
Some were Australian and from the UK, but mostly all from North America.
Yeah.
And so it was all all of us, and the kids were not Chinese. Or unless the only kids that were allowed to go in these schools are foreign nationals, is what they were called in China. So they had to have a passport that wasn't Chinese in order to go. They did not want Chinese nationals going because they had their own program, if you could imagine.
Right.
And on things they want to make sure that their citizens are thinking. So so it was like a lot of Brazilians and a lot of Koreans and just like a real large swath. I don't know. It just didn't seem, I was a first grade teacher, so it just that didn't really come up. I didn't really have an incident. I had one incident that was really interesting happen to me in Saudi Arabia, but not in China. It's funny enough.
Yeah. So it was more that feeling of you felt that was that internalized thing again, like when you were walking around.
Oh yeah. And because I'm mixed race, people, depending on how I was dressed, what I'd wear, I have hooded eyes, so they would I had people that cock their head and start speaking Mandarin to me just to see, do I have a parent that's Chinese? You know what I mean? And it's they just weren't sure. And I'm really short, right? So I'm not tall. So I fit in that way, right? And it was interesting. Now, there was the typical, when I did, quote unquote, lose weight. Oh, you look great. Oh, what are you doing? That kind of crap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know people think it's well-being.
No, it's horrible. Don't do it.
Just don't.
We should never comment on anybody's bodies ever, because we don't know what's going on.
We don't.
Yeah.
I had a lot more of this stuff happen in Saudi Arabia, but the interesting thing is when I left China, I decided I was done yo-yo dieting. I was done. And
what prompted it?
Honestly, right now, I don't even remember. I think it's because I started gaining the weight back again.
Yeah.
I was going to Hong Kong all the time on the ferry, getting all these alternative treatments and doing all the candida treatment and this thing and that thing. I was spending so much money, and I was restricting my diet so much in order to be healthy. And I have quotation marks for that for people who can't see. And just so much time and energy, and yet there was this mountain, Danshan Mountain there, that was all steps. And funny enough, they have speakers, they have rocks that are speakers. And so, loud music all the way up and down for those of you who want to enjoy peaceful nature. But I loved it. I loved my time in China. And my friend and I would walk up this mountain. It was huge. And we would run down because we were crazy. There's no we weren't thinking clearly about the risk of falling down these steps. Not sure what that says about my mental state, but and I just think if I could do that now, wow, and I just remember we were always trying to be smaller, you know what I mean? But I was a runner, and I was doing all the things, and I was so able-bodied. And the reason I guess I can reflect is because I'm not now. So it's a real it's
right.
I wasted so much time with that. So I don't know what prompted it, but I can't remember now, but I remember very distinctly, I'm just all done.
Yeah. Good for you.
think I was really seeing how weight cycling was so detrimental to your health. And so I was I'm just not doing that anymore. But at the time I was still restricted, gluten and just other stuff. I just felt like it wasn't good. It was hurting my stomach. I wasn't all that. So you can imagine living overseas. It's hard to get. So much of my time and energy was like trying to get these certain foods and trying to do all this stuff. And so I decided I was going to do my bucket list anyway. And on my bucket list was scuba diving and skiing. Never done. I was always waiting. Oh, and I didn't wear a swimsuit my whole time in China. So I was like, I don't know what, I wish now I knew what had inspired me, because I would give them a shout out. I don't know. I don't remember now. But I was like, I'm done with this. And I moved to Saudi Arabia, right literally on the coast. Like my house was 2 blocks from the beach. And that was glorious. I'm not going to lie. And I'm in a swimsuit, and I learned how to scuba dive, and I did ski at Ski Dubai.
Yes.
I went to Ski Dubai with my son and did one lesson, and it was fun, but it hurt my shins so bad. I was like, I'm never doing this again. But I tried it, right? Like I tried it. I was able to mark it off. So, but I was still very much, then I got into functional medicine. And I became like this super functional medicine nerd. And again, just another healthism, like, not saying there's nothing to be had about what functional medicine does, but it's definitely a very easily toxic place where everyone's trying to sell stuff, right? And so in the end, it's just a bunch of marketing and advertising, in my opinion. And I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. And so I spent my 5 years in Saudi when I lived off the beach, not dieting, I wasn't trying to lose weight. I did once when I did something, but I was so into like being able to move my body and do different things. And, that was awesome. But I wish I could have just enjoyed it, because my size was fine. You know what I mean? My body was fine. My body was doing all the things. And I did have a big tummy. I've always had a big belly. And it's kind of a hallmark of PCOS for a lot of people. But I do remember like going into a doctor there and them looking right at me and going, "We need to check your blood sugar," because they were just for sure I had diabetes. And, I had it on my chart that I had PCOS, but like no one ever put it together, but no one checked my insulin levels. They only checked my blood sugar. My body is awesome. I just have to say, can we just send a little love to my pancreas? It has been working like 3 times harder its whole life to maintain my blood sugar at a decent level until very recently when I hit mid-age, and this is what happens. And then your insulin resistance goes off the chart. But they didn't, we just don't get the right medical care. You know what I mean? And as a woman and in a bigger body. So I ended up leaving my marriage, moving to the States. Had a instance with mold, and then got really sick. And and then like I moved here in 2015 at the end. So I was bringing my son back to live in America and be a part of the change. And that's not what happened in our country, as everyone knows. And so it's just been, I was a single mom for years, and I started learning more about like anti-racism work in my teaching career. And that led me into more of like the justice kind of community. And then when I wanted to stop teaching because I couldn't do it anymore, I was in a lot of pain and whatnot from my condition. Anyway, that's how I've ended up here. And so for the last 2 years, my body has changed dramatically. And I'm much larger. I'm now fat, and I'm a lot less able-bodied. So it's interesting for me to think back to all of that. Like you just made me think back, like, what was it 10? What was it 5 years? And it took my point of the whole story is it took me a long time. Like I went from, oh, wait a minute, weight cycling and yo-yo diet isn't great, to, okay, I'm not going to do that. And then I'm just going to try to get to the symptom, and I'm going to try to appreciate. And then it was, what was it? What was the next thing? Like body
body positivity.
Body positivity. Yeah. So I tried, of course I tried that, and I tried to embrace all of that. And then as I've dealt more and more into the world of having more justice in the world, it has definitely been, body neutrality is definitely felt much better for me. And just like realizing all the different intersections about, like the colonial mindset and racism and anti-fatness, and just, you know what I mean? Like when you're talking about that internalized anti-fatness or it's just like, that's lifelong work.
Yeah.
It's never going to be over for us. We were born in it. We're swimming in it constantly.
Yeah.
Right. So we're just like, it's just like this continually unpacking.
Yeah.
But I feel so much more liberated now. And I go to Planet Fitness right now, not trying to plug for them, but I do, it's working for me. But I just take up all the space.
Nice.
I just take up all the space. I go
so what does
that
look like? Yeah.
Tell us what that looks like. The other day, and I can appreciate there's not like a lot of political things going on or anything. And I love their like real inclusive environment that they're trying to cultivate there. There's like no shame and no judgment written all over. And this place is for everybody. Yeah. It's actually great. And they're really big. So you can kind of get a lot, like you don't feel like you're just
on top of each other.
Yeah, which I appreciate. And they have so many different options of different kinds of things and ways you can move your body that could feel good. And so what that looks like is like, I like to do the treadmill. And I often listen to podcasts. So I've been doing a little bit more and more. I'm building up my stamina there, and that's feeling really good because I live in present day so-called North Carolina in the US on the East Coast. It is hot. It is hot here in the summer. Like I lived in Saudi Arabia, and I thought when I moved here, y'all are wusses. It's fine. No.
It's the humidity.
It's so bad that you just don't want to be outside.
Yeah.
And it's like the opposite of what you think summer would be, right? Yeah. It's like, it's the indoor time for us.
It is.
And so, so joining the gym has been such a great thing to get me out of the house and doing it. And I'm enjoying it. And I do the weights, and I do like sometimes I do the little circuit, and then I have to glare at people who aren't doing it, I'm the older fat lady, and they're like, what are you doing? But I just go in there and I just like take up all the space and do my thing and like have zero fucks. I
love it. Yes, you can absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah. That reminds me of something I read recently, someone else talking about the gym, and it was so interesting. Until I read this post or meme or whatever it was, I was like, I hadn't thought about it, but part of fat liberation or body neutrality is also breathing the way that you're going to breathe. I have never until I read that, I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't realize just how self-conscious I am about being in the presence of others and breathing heavily, because that's part of my internalized fat phobia. Oh, there's the fat woman breathing hard. And so when I read that, I thought, oh my God, I still worry about that. I still will choose to opt out of something if I'm with certain people, not all people, but certain people, where they're going to hear my breath get heavier and like, like just breathing heavy, like from exertion. And then I read this thing and I thought, oh, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm just going to breathe the way I'm going to breathe. And people can have their own damn thoughts. But that's part of taking up space. Something as simple as breathing heavily when you're going through exertion and not making it about fatness, making it about my muscles are doing what they're supposed to do. My lungs are growing, expanding, and contracting as they're supposed to. But it's funny because, again, this idea of internalized fat phobia, I was just shocked. And this is like last week, I think, maybe a couple of days ago when I saw this thing and I thought, oh shit, there's another one. There's another pocket of my own internalized anti-fatness still showing up.
That's a hard one because even I am still unpacking that because I've known about that. It's interesting how this stuff is so ingrained and so deep down that you don't even think about it. And I have not wanted to be walking up. I live in a hilly little neighborhood, and when I do walk, I'm puffing and huffing up. Well, I'm puffing and huffing most of it, but up the hill for sure.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have to stop. Like I can't do the whole hill right now. And I just have to stop and rest and catch my breath and then continue on, which is all fine. It shouldn't be a thing. And then when like all the kids are out or there's a bunch of people out walking, like there's the bus stops or, whatever, I get so self-conscious.
Yes.
Like I want to reroute. I want to get on across the street. I'm still catching myself.
Yeah.
Not that long ago kind of doing it. So I love that reminder.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, your gym example brought it up for me. And I'm so happy to hear that there's a gym that is focusing on a little more neutral space. I'm checking out a new, because I want to also be more active, but I've done all the gyms and the ones that I have been to suck. Like I just can't do it. And I've also done personal trainers and that was great. But there's this place, I live in a rural area right now. There's this place, I love this name. It really connotes what it is. Farm Girl Fitness. When there's like tires and you like walk with blocks of wood, like it's all, apparently we're doing farm chores. Which I think is hysterical. But what convinced me to give kind of group exercise a chance was the founder in the About Us, About Me section names diet culture and how this is a space where she does not want that to happen. And she came from a more conventional gym setting and there was a lot of that toxicity and she's purposefully trying to be different. And so I'm going to give it another shot. I'm meeting with a trainer next week. We'll see. It's going to be my first question because now that I am in my 40s and fat and embrace it, I don't give two fucks and be like, before we do anything, I need you to tell me your stance on diet culture. How is that upheld in this space? If you hear people talking about weight loss, are you going to stop it? Because I don't want to be in that kind of space. And it's actually toxic for everybody. So please prove to me that what's on your website is actually going to happen. So I'm an eternal hopeful optimist, so we shall see. But I'm so happy you found a space that you can go to and take up space, Treva. Like just even when you said that, I felt the luxury of that. I can be here and I can take up space.
Yeah. I mean, yesterday I had a hard day co-parenting and parenting my kid. And I was upset. And the first inclination, this is how I know I've really ingrained in the habit of moving. I needed to move my body because I was feeling a lot of resentment. You know what I mean? And just you just need to work that out. Yeah. We can't control all that stuff, right? And so it's like you have to move it out. And I wore my You're on Native Land t-shirt. Yes. To the gym. And I was just on that treadmill, moving, listening to some good music. And but I would have never given it a shot if it wouldn't have been for another friend who was also in a fat body saying how comfortable they felt there. And so it's really great. Like when we connect with other people who are fat and have similar, lived experience, that we can advocate for each other and we can help each other kind of find spaces that have a little bit more ease in them. Yeah. Because everywhere we go is a landmine,
Right. And the labor involved with evaluating each place, emotional labor possibly of explaining or educating or advocating for our needs. So sharing that wisdom is so, so good. Speaking of, connection to others and the fact that you were wearing your shirt, you're on Native Land, which is delightful and important. Though a lot of the work that you have done has been about lineage and connection to our ancestors. And one of the things I'm really curious about is what role, if any, does body have to do with that piece? You have on your website that you help people remember their power, connecting them through their lineages, their own traditions and community care rituals, all without culturally appropriating, which I think is brilliant and beautiful. And I love that work. And I just think about my own lineage, my own mother and father, and specifically my mom, and then my grandmom, and then my great grandmother, and like all these stories that have been passed down. And when I think about them through a body-based lens, I can see why my family and now resulting in me is very, very screwed up around food. I mean, I come from a family of deep poverty. My mom's family were in the mountains, rural mountains, like of Greece, with like nothing, literally like a donkey was their big possession. And I think that was shared amongst a few families. You know, it was deep poverty. And my parents, when they immigrated here as children, there was still that poverty mindset. There was still so much food scarcity until my parents, were able to get through university and start working, and then, started their less poverty defined lives. And it's interesting because that's also when a lot of where we kids came along, and a lot of food stuff happened. And what does it mean to look a certain way? And I think that's where a lot of the cultural conditioning came in. Because in our family, food and enjoyment of eating is a bit of a cultural tradition, I think, passed down for Greek people. But because there was such poverty growing up, it's almost like it went the other way with massive abundance, but that can't show on your body. And then there was this whole equation of eating food with fat bodies. And it just is so convoluted and complicated. I'm still parsing through a lot of it to understand it. But it feels to me like there is a real connection between lineage and body size. And like you said, you have your grandmother's body. I totally have my grandmother's body on my dad's side, like spitting image. And she's the one who basically indoctrinated me into diet culture as a kid. And I'm still reckoning with how I feel about that, and my disappointment and my heartbreak around that, and what could have been different. So all that to say, there's something so interesting to me about lineage and bodies, and like, what do you know about that? What work have you done in that area? What do you even know about your own grandmother's experience? Because you mentioned your grandmother's had a particular experience as well.
Yeah. Well, my grandma Shirley is kind of the inspiration for a lot of my current work. She is my mother's mother. And she was not white growing up in rural Iowa in the States. And she ended up like having a very large body in her adult life. So much so that this is her story. She was like over 300 pounds, and she goes to the doctor, and I think this is in the 70s, they did a very experimental surgery. It was one of the first ones where they took out part of your large intestine, and to see if that would help, her quote unquote lose weight, right?
So like early gastric bypass kind of thing before they were doing.
She was like in the experimental. Yeah, she is, and of course, like here we are, a woman of color,
Yeah, right.
Being experimented on, and but she wanted help with it. I don't know how much her life was like. I don't know physically how her life was impacted by being in a larger body, but she had many children. She was able. She probably. I mean, I'm assuming she probably had PCOS or something like that, because that's it can often be genetic. And my mom reflected on it, because I don't know how old my mom was when she got the surgery, but I think she was still a minor, and she remembered like her losing a lot of weight and her not liking it. My mom not liking it because it wasn't who her mom was, right? And like she lost some of that softness that she was used to, and and my grandma was still a big woman. She was never small. She was still a big woman, and she had this like big scar around her stomach from the surgery. And I don't know if that surgery ever helped her with blood sugar or insulin resistance, as often, Indigenous people have a much higher incidence of insulin resistance and diabetes. And there's lots of reasons and theories for that. And also alcoholism. My grandmother struggled with that. But for the time I knew her, she had quit drinking. She was older. And yeah, she was just always big. I loved her for who she was, and she didn't lack from attention from men, no matter her body size. Like, she had several children with different men, like, obviously things were, you know what I mean? It's just so interesting, right? It's like, you have to be small and you have to attract a guy and you have to keep him, and just all this like really like horrible messaging we get about why our bodies need to be, smaller and take up less space. And my grandma was a strong woman who, could work hard and labored hard. I think she was like a CNA. She ended up having a back injury, but so her life was not easy. Growing up in the place she did, not being white, but I never, her body was always just who she was, and like, I try to remember that, like, when I think about my body and who's judging it, and I think my own kids, this is just who I am, right? It doesn't matter what size my body is. It's just who we are, right? It's just who we are. And that's how I thought about my grandma. I never thought she was quote unquote fat or cared, or she was just a soft woman I could hug and love,
Yeah.
So, and I think she died when she was 63. She was fairly young, and I think she had a lot of digestive issues and stuff from getting the surgery, things that they don't really tell you. So that's that story. I'm just reflecting on that. But something that I sometimes run groups and cohorts that talk about lineage and heritage, right? And we get to go explore our lineage. That's why I know a lot. I've been taking trips to places where my relatives and ancestors have lived, and done all this kind of fun stuff. And one of the things that we do is we don't just talk about only going back in your family tree. We talk about how to, kind of explore and connect with your ancestors, and looking at that lineage is sometimes just get a picture, right? And look at it just real closely. And like, is there any similarities? Is there anything you notice? Is there anything you share? And and just like all the details about the picture and the clothing and maybe the background. And just like, there's just like a whole exercise we do. It doesn't all have to be this, like, who's your DNA and all, I don't know, just like, all that, like ancestry.com. So it's a great tool, but there's so many other ways we can explore our lineage, and we can explore those connections with our bodies. So that's one that I like to do, is like looking at photographs and like really like honoring who they were, realizing they're all unique, seeing what things I might share. And then the other one is putting my body on land that my ancestors were on, if that's available, is really powerful, right?
Yeah. It's one of the reasons I want to go back to Greece soon as an adult, because I went twice, but I was 14 and 16. And I mean, 16-year-old Sophia was not thinking about anything really other than beach and boys. So I've often thought like to physically be in that space and imagine and feel connected to the earth and kind of walk on the mountains that my ancestors walked on. And my dad's family is from a bigger city, from Thessaloniki. So going there and just, like there is this desire to be connected. I think that do you think it's to help us understand who we are now? Is that why we want to explore lineage?
Yeah, I think, there's always been, in all like traditional societies, we've always had a connection with our ancestors and our lineage and where we come from and the land. Like, that's actually the human condition. That's actually what's natural, and I think more restorative for us. And but the colonial mindset and the kind of system we live in now, the dominant culture we have, is a real disconnection. And that's why, like I talk about cultural appropriation, but the reason people are cultural appropriating, it's not because people are evil. it's because there's a big hole, right? There's this big void of like meaning and roots and connection. And that has been stripped away systematically by white supremacy culture, right? And because you have to buy into whiteness to get the advantage and to get and when you're raising your family and you have children, it's really hard not to take that advantage. I'm not going to lie,
Absolutely.
right? Like we all, all of us in our families have, probably have tried to partake in some sort of way because the system really is destructive, and you're trying to find a way to survive it, right? So going back to our lineage, exploring it with curiosity and joy, and being able to process grief about, things. Not all of our ancestors were well, and that's okay, and just having like rituals and being able to have time to explore all these, like the food and the traditions, and your stories, and the land, because our bodies are like, we're in our DNA, our bodies are made up of like the land, you know what I mean? And the food that was there and the way we lived in the land so much informed our culture, what we ate, what we celebrated, right? That's still in us, that's still literally built into our bones. So I think it's a great way to, like, especially if you're working on decolonizing and you're working for more justice in the world, I think connecting back to where your ancestors came from, or let's say you're adopted, or, that like the culture you grew up in, or, wherever you're at now, there's all different ways to approach it. There's no right or wrong way, in my opinion. I just think that having that piece, being able to play with that and have that connection is so important, because it gives you this like ground to stand on of relation, right? Like how can we relate to Indigenous people that of the land we live on now? Let's say, if we live on land that is traditionally not land from our own ancestors, how can we start to respect, right, and be in a reciprocal relationship if we don't even know where we come from?
Yeah.
Right. So it's like a really important step.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I like that you mentioned grief as well, because this, especially if people have been harmed by their lineage, or there's trauma in their lineage that's been passed down generation by generation, so that, we bear it, it's in the epigenetics are living inside of me. There is a resentment, a frustration, a grief a grief process, I would say, probably, that needs to be gone through to be able to come into right relationship with our lineage. This is really close to me right now, especially with my grandmother's death. And I, felt the need to protect myself. And therefore only went to one small part of the service, didn't do the whole thing, because I couldn't. And this is a horrible thing to say, but it felt so important to me. It still feels important. I couldn't honor in that moment, and no one in my family understands, because they didn't experience what I did and they don't believe what I say about it. And so I'm proud of my ancestry. I'm proud of so many things that my family has done. I think there's a tenacity that comes with being an immigrant. I think it's, there's the stories that these, intergenerational or what is it, previous generational stories that exist. Like my family was a little rebellious. I know where I get my rebel streak. They may have also been criminals, which I also kind of feel. I feel like the counterculture element there that shows up in me as well. But there's also pain. Like I experienced pain, and reckoning with that, Treva, is really hard. And I know people who, in different workshops I've taught where they talk about, they're estranged from their family when they acknowledged being queer. And now they're trying to explore this as well. How do I stay connected to my lineage when I no longer talk to anyone in my immediate family? We've been estranged for 10 years because of that pain. Like, you know, what would you say to me?
I have a couple of things.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple
Thank you. Help me with my pain.
This is a it's just do let like smaller bites, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're thinking about your recent ancestor who's just passed on, your grandma, do it like smaller, right? Like take less. Like we have this idea in this dominant culture that we're just going to fix ourselves. We're going to do this big thing and then it'll be done.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to be
yes,
healed and I'll be able to like forget, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just so much more messier than that.
So messy.
So just be okay with the mess, be in it. And grief is interesting. It comes in waves. It's just such an interesting, it's a part of being human,
Mm-hmm.
and I just say, lean into the uncomfortable feeling and then lean out.
Yeah.
You don't have to stay there. Do you know what I mean? So like when you're thinking about harm or this like her passing has brought up fresh, all of this, it's triggered all this, this past trauma for you and these actions and behaviors that weren't great for you, right? And there's also this thing of we were all swimming in it.
Yeah.
Right. So I think about this with like, I have a ton, I guess, Scottish ancestry. I don't really know where it all comes from, but when I think about it, Scottish people were colonized, right? And treated horribly. And then they came here to escape that, but then in turn did it to the Indigenous people here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it's complex. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just like acknowledging that our ancestors were human. You know what I mean? And so that's the other thing I do is just like not to like forget or just it all. I can acknowledge that and it will all go away. These feelings I'm having, that's not how it works.
Mm-hmm.
But we can acknowledge that they also are human, doing the best they could in this very flawed system, right? And how this work is multi-generational work. So, and we're dealing with generations. Like I'm not very familiar. I'm familiar with a lot of histories around the world, but Greek history is not something I'm super familiar with. But I have this inkling that there's quite a bit of trauma in Greek history from like the Ottoman Empire and like all the stuff going on. I can't speak from any like expert level on that, but then like any famines it's like you went through, any of the wars, all of that is living in your bones. That was living in your grandmother's bones, right? And so we react and we compartmentalize. And often when people come to a new place for a better life, they want to play by those rules because they want to gain the same advantage. And so if I can only imagine your grandma like seeing the advantage, and being like, we need to be this way so we can have these advantages. Because being fat is at a disadvantage, especially now, right? Yeah. Like it's a disadvantage in a lot of ways, and that's not right. It's not fair. Yeah. And other people will do everything they can not to have to deal with that, right? What they think's in their control. And then the other thing is you could play around with an altar, but have salt on it. So a practice I learned from, I think, Mary Beth, the words are going to escape me, but this has always happened to me. I'm really horrible with names. I can't think of the name of her program right now. But it could be in the show notes.
Yeah.
Send it to
me when you think of it.
Yeah, I'm happy to. She does a lot of lineage work and a lot of ritual work, and she's of an Italian American descent, and she is from Sicily, and she goes back to Sicily. She takes groups there, all of that. She does some really great work. And something I learned from her is that having a jar of salt. So we're on a podcast, so it wouldn't matter if I showed you. But I have one right now because I have some ancestors that were German Catholic, which is a really long, funny story, because I've had 2 German Catholic long partners in my life, and I had no, like, who knows German Catholics in America? Not very many people. And somehow I have 2 long-term partners that were German Catholic.
Interesting.
Did not grow up religious at all, right? But I do actually have ancestors German Catholic, and the reason I don't know them is because there was a lot of sexual abuse, trauma, and stuff on that side of the family. To which my current German Catholic partner said, that checks. Right? Like these institutions are, it's a struggle, right? So I have a jar of salt.
Yeah.
And I actually have a rosary, right?
Because a jar of salt is like just table salt? I don't know.
Yeah, whatever salt you want. Yeah, whatever salt you want. It's like cleansing and protective, and in a lot of traditions. And so you put it in a jar, and so you put it on your altar, and you can put it with a picture, and you can say, look, it's a not well ancestor. Right? You can still honor, but you can also say these things were not, and like help heal that energy, and help heal that rift, and help that from continuing on. Do you know what I mean? And just because they need us too. It's a reciprocal relationship with our ancestors. That's what I believe.
Yeah. Well, and you're making me think about, I forget something that you said just triggered for me around my grandmother thought she was probably just trying to protect me. I mean, it definitely was not malice. It was done out of love. But it's funny, it's hard because it's so close and because it was so painful. It's hard for me to see that. But when you said that, I'm like, oh my gosh, of course she was doing it out of love. It's how, I mean, when my grandparents, both sets of grandparents immigrated to Canada and the US, there was kind of this huge migration in the, I think, mid-50s, something like that, early mid-50s. There were signs on stores saying no rats, no Greeks. Like it was, Greeks were considered non-white. And there was this a lot of racism and discrimination towards Greek people. And yeah, of course, you're right. Like you said, of course, to be white passing, to fit in with the culture. So that's actually softened my heart a little bit, even just realizing, oh yeah, right. It was out of protection and love. And the only way that really she could. Now, it was one of those things that people always joke about. It's like, you need to lose weight. Now eat the spanakopita I just made, like it's that we have both of those things. Like a lot of people can relate to with, immigrant, or like, I think that's kind of like a European thing, right? Lose weight, but eat more. And anyway, it is messy. It's messy and it's complicated. And I love the idea of because I've really avoided, I have an altar space. I have different things that I meditate over, and I have not been able to. And I feel like you've bolstered my courage a little bit to maybe go there and take a jar of salts and just sit with my grandmother. Ooh, I get teary just thinking about that. That actually feels really hard, but really important.
Yeah, just remember little bites.
Little bites. Yeah, thank you.
We're dealing with generations of trauma, right? We're dealing with we're dealing with this dominant culture's narrative, of fitting in. And as we know, fat phobia is like the last frontier that it's acceptable to, and that's starting to change a tiny bit, I think, but not, as we know, not enough. But even when you're in other marginalized bodies, like being fat is, do you know what I mean? It just makes everything, so parents are trying to grapple with how to help their kids navigate this. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's such a more recent phenomenon too, this anti-fatness,
Mhm.
in a way that like certain countries and cultures were kind of known for being more, hefty built, or,
Mhm.
more solid, or more tall, or, whatever it was. And it just wasn't that big of a deal
Yeah.
until, I can't remember now. I know Enlightenment, and all that, not Enlightenment.
Renaissance?
It was after that. I can't think now. The words escape me. As per usual, I love having memory issues with my vision. But anyway, it was like white dudes from the UK, like, and the whole start of, like, I think why we, like, the Americans tried to get independence from England.
Mhm.
And someone will know and say it, but there was just this writing where it was like a moral issue to be thin.
Yes.
It became this like moral issue, and
Mhm.
and
Well,
that
to separate from Black culture, that's like Sabrina
Yes.
Strings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Fearing the Black body.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and no one who's immigrating here to the New World would want to be associated with a Black body, because Black bodies were treated so horrendously. No one would want that. Who would want to be treated like that, right? Like, I can't, it's horrific. And so it makes sense, right? It's not right, and it was harmful. And again, you can have intentions, but then you actually have, like, there's intent, and then there's actually what happens, right?
Mhm.
And we have to
we have to deal with the
be
impact.
honest. We have to deal with the impact and be honest about it. So that's why you shut the jar of salt, so it all stays in there.
I love it.
It all stays in there. And there is a way to process it after a while. But anyway, you'll have to take our class.
Yeah, perfect. I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, so good. This is such a great conversation, Treva. I want to, before we close, I would love for you to share with us, because I know you have many ways that you say connected to joy. How do you do that? How do you, embrace joy in a world that wants to rob you of it?
Well, I have a few. One was some of the podcasts I listen to, because what I find is I need support. I need to surround myself with constant support. So, like, I need to be around other fat people. I need to see fat people in different bodies on my, social media feed. I need to be connected with different people. And so some of the ways I do that is I'm in the Kelly Deals community that has lots of variety of people and justice informed people that it's delight to make connections in there. I love Maintenance Phase. The podcast
my favorite.
Maintenance Phase.
Yeah.
That is just, that keeps blowing my mind. So I'm like, oh man, I bought that one, hook, line, and sinker. Oh man, I totally just was with the masses on that one,
Yeah.
And then the 3 Questions with Kat and Val also is an absolute joy. I'm in a special group called PCOS Body Liberation for people with PCOS, and it is an anti-diet, really cool way. Lots of great science, but just being around other people with similar lived experience and similar challenges that I'm going through has been so helpful for me. Even if it didn't do anything, just knowing I'm not alone, right? Yeah, just knowing I'm not alone has made a huge difference for my mental health and just how I'm tackling that. And then I just think about the things I like, and I've had to do some work because my body's changed a lot, and I'm not as nearly as able-bodied. Some of it's coming back. Who knows what will happen? But today, this is what my body can do. And I used to be a world traveler, and that's just not as comfortable for me now. And it just doesn't even hold a lot of, that's not where I want to find joy anymore. But where I do find joy is going to the movie theater with the big, comfortable seats. I went and saw The Woman King.
I'm going in 2 weeks, I hope, with a good friend. We've been saving it for each other. So good.
Do it. Do it.
Cannot wait.
Definitely do it. And I love paddleboarding. And I used to, I've been paddleboarding for years, since Saudi Arabia. And I have a wonderful partner. I have a partner that I'm with, and they are just so supportive on meeting me where I'm at. So I can't really stand up right now on a paddleboard, but I still love getting out there. And so I just do what I can. And I just keep repeating, like, I'm having fun. I'm doing what I can. I'm going to take up the space. And then once in a while I get a little irritated because people will say, they'll look at my partner and ask him for tips about how to paddleboard when I'm the one that taught him. And, I've been like in paddleboard races and, all that. But because I'm a fat chick sitting on it, obviously I know nothing. But, it's just, I just have to brush that stuff aside and go out there and do what the hell I want because it just doesn't matter. Right.
Yeah.
It just doesn't matter.
Oh, I love all of those. And thank you for the reminder about finding anti-diet focused support groups or, whether it's on Facebook or whatever, because I'm on a bunch of endometriosis boards, but oh my God, the diet culture talk is brutal. And why, again, Trevia, there are these moments where I'm like, oh my God, this is like the work I do in the world. Why didn't I even think to type in anti-diet endometriosis?
Or how like health at every size will come up. There's certain keywords that you can use to kind of filter out some, just to get a little bit of a better alignment. No, I feel you. It's hard. That's why you have to talk to other people. I know. This is why like humans are supposed to be connected. Like, that's like there's really something to that. We can't know it all. We need people. We need our mirrors. We need people to ask us questions. Yeah, no, that's great. Those are I love all those suggestions. And I'm so appreciating right now, Trevia, the way you're framing, like, this is what my body can do today. And the questions I'm going to ask is, am I having fun? Am I feeling good? Like, I love that approach. That really is much more of that body neutrality approach. Or I have a client who coined the term, I don't know if she created it, but I'd never heard it before, which was body equanimity, which that feels like very much this being in right relationship with body. And I don't have to love everything about it. I don't have to hate everything about it. I get to just be present with what is. And that feels really good. And it's just like honoring your capacity. I just have to honor my capacity of dealing. Like when we go out into the world, we're dealing with an anti-fat world, right? We're dealing with fat phobia, and it's brutal out there. It's brutal. You go to a restaurant and you're like, where do I sit? What do I do? Who's going to, it's just like, it's a lot of extra mental load, and it could be harmful. And so, maybe you don't, like, I just don't do as much as I used to out in the world, but I also love having company, right? I love doing things with other people. And so I was like, my house is really comfortable right now. I've spent some time and investment making my house really comfortable. That brings me joy. Yeah. And now I'm like, I should just have people here. Yes. Then I don't have to navigate that. Like, I know my bathroom's my best. My couch is where, you know what I mean? Like, I got new dining room chairs that will fit all, anybody I can think of. You know what I mean? And so it's like, it's just thinking about our capacity and being okay with it changing. Right.
Which is also rebellious because that's anti-capitalist, anti-hustle culture, anti-toxic productivity. All the antis make me very happy. I'm like, that's right. I will not conform. Thank you, Trevia. This has been such a beautiful conversation. I feel so warmed by your presence. And I have a little to-do list of things that I'm going to do for myself based on our conversation to be a little more at peace with I'll start with my grandmother. I'm going to take small bites. I'm going to get some salt. And I'm also going to look for a little more weight neutral support group for endo. So thank you. Thank you for my takeaways.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Before we go, I'd like to read a poem because poetry can reach our hearts in a different way. Poems can have us feel in a different way. And that's what this podcast is about, expanding our hearts, deepening our empathy, and inviting in joy. So each week, you get a new poem. Today's poem is by Naomi Shihab Nye, and it's called Valentine for Earnest Man. Every time I read this poem, I am delighted and I am moved by it. I think it's that because there's something so profound about the moment. And you'll hear when I read it. when the poems that have been hiding in the eyes of skunks is revealed. It takes my breath away every time. And I chose it for the episode with Trevia Woods because Trevia has a gift for seeing what is hiding in intergenerational trauma and lineage. And this poem had me thinking a lot about that. So here it is. You can't order a poem like you order a taco. Walk up to the counter and say, "I'll take 2, and expect it to be handed back to you on a shiny plate. Still, I like your spirit. Anyone who says, 'Here's my address, write me a poem,' deserves something in reply. So I'll tell a secret instead. Poems hide. In the bottoms of our shoes, they are sleeping. They are the shadows drifting across our ceilings the moment before we wake up. What we have to do is live in a way that lets them find us. Once I knew a man who gave his wife 2 skunks for a Valentine. He couldn't understand why she was crying. I thought they had such beautiful eyes, and he was serious. He was a serious man who lived in a serious way. Nothing was ugly just because the world said so. He really liked those skunks. So he reinvented them as Valentines, and they became beautiful, at least to him. And the poems that had been hiding in the eyes of skunks for centuries crawled out and curled up at his feet. Maybe if we reinvent whatever our life gives us, we find poems. Check your garage, the odd sock in your drawer, the person you almost like, but not quite. And let me know. Thank you for joining me today. My hope is that you're feeling a little less alone and a little more seen. So until the next episode, you can find me on Instagram at fatjoy.life, on the website at www.fatjoy.life, and on Patreon at patreon.com/fatjoy. Please don't forget to check out the show notes for how you can connect with my amazing guest and for the links to the poem. All right, lovely. I am sending you off with my wishes for an abundantly fat joy day. Talk again soon.